Good afternoon, everyone. Happy to be here this afternoon. My name is Karen Bush, and I'm here presenting along with my colleagues. Lee Brown will hopefully be joining us later. She was having a little bit of difficulty getting connected, and also Christy Toms is on the call with us, and our colleague Blake Connie. All of us are housed in the Division of Student Success in the branch of Safe and Supportive Schools. Lee, Christy, and I are all PBIS ISF consultants, and Blake is a Safe Schools consultant. So we're hoping that what we're going to present to you all today will be something that will be very beneficial and helpful. So we're going to start just kind of by talking about a couple of, well, hang on, let me back up. I missed on this slide. I was going to say the purpose of our training today is really directed toward PBIS teams. So I'm not sure who else on the call and if you are currently implementing PBIS or not. I feel like what we're going to say would be helpful for anyone, but I did want to kind of throw that disclaimer out that we're really gearing this toward PBIS teams, and a lot of the information that we're going to share today relates to people that would be implementing. So just wanted to kind of throw that out before we get started with our slides. So the first slide we're going to talk about this afternoon has some acronyms on there, and so we wanted to share some of these and just talk about them in case we do have some people that are not implementing PBIS. PBIS stands for Positive Behavior Interventions and Supports, and sometimes you will see that noted as the second bullet there, SW PBIS. That just stands for School-Wide PBIS. That is also considered an MTSS, or a multi-tiered system of support, and we don't really have that acronym on there. I wish we had added that. But we hear that term multi-tiered system of support many times, and sometimes people think that's different from PBIS, but that's really what PBIS is. It's a multi-tiered system of support. So we have tier 1 many times where we have people looking at school-wide. How are we going to implement this school-wide? So a lot of times that's when we see that term school-wide, is when we're referring to our tier 1 implementation. And then that next bullet there you see says Interconnected Systems Framework, ISF. You might hear us mention that during our presentation today. Interconnected Systems Framework is just another multi-tiered system of support, or it's part of that multi-tiered system of support where we're looking at how are we approaching behavioral health and what types of interventions can we do to support students with behavioral health needs, where that's different from PBIS, because with PBIS we're just looking at behavior within that system. Some schools also will incorporate their RTI or academics into a multi-tiered system of support. And so many times when we have schools that are integrating all of those behavioral health, and academics all into one, they'll just refer to it as MTSS. So I know that's a lot of information and they're all really interconnected. So we wanted to kind of clarify the difference and how those are used within the presentation. The last bullet you see there is the tiered fidelity inventory. That is the inventory that our schools that are implementing the behavior piece or PBIS utilize to measure fidelity. When we talk about fidelity, we're talking about how well are we doing what we said we would do, and how well does that line up with the research and the evidence that is backing up that systemic approach that we're trying to accomplish. That TFI has different features set up at each tier, so our schools can assess themselves at tier 1, tier 2, or tier 3, or all 3 tiers. So it's a very useful tool, and we refer to that several times throughout our presentation. So we just wanted to make sure that you all were aware of that and what that means. And just to kind of throw out a little a side note here, each year we recognize schools that implement with fidelity. So if you are on the call and you're implementing PBIS and you're using the TFI, but you've never really been a part of that recognition, we definitely would love to hear from you. We send out those applications late spring each year, and then we acknowledge those schools usually in early September. So we'd love to have you be a part of that recognition if you are implementing. So thoughts on database decision making. I'd like for you to take just a second and read this quote. Read that and just kind of reflect on, what does this look like and what does it mean in your setting? And when I say setting, I'm not exactly sure who all's on the call. I'm assuming we probably have some district folks and maybe some school level folks on the call. But I'd like for you to think about it maybe from a district perspective, and if you're at the school level, you know, also maybe look at that from your school level perspective. But what does database decision making look like for you? And as leaders at a district level, I know that you want to be as informed as you possibly can and have the best data possible with which you make decisions for your district and for your schools. So we know this is an area where districts and schools are always looking to refine and improve. So a lot of what we're going to talk about today kind of stems from some things that we have seen with the data and how things maybe are entered into the system that could pose some limitations on your ability to be effective as database decision makers. And so we're hoping that some of the things we're going to talk about and maybe present some of the guidance that we're providing will help maybe spur some thinking on your end for things that you might could look at or consider to make that better. So on this slide, we all have goals as educators, and essentially, you know, our main focus as educators is to improve students' social competence and academic achievement. And we do that by creating a very positive and engaging learning environment for students. So by doing that, we want to focus on 3 things: systems, practices, and data. Systems are those things that support staff. So within your district or your school, hopefully you have systems set up that all of your staff are familiar with. And since we're talking about behavior here, you probably have a discipline system. That system is set in place so that you can have consistency with how your staff handle discipline problems, and that you're hopefully creating a common language among all staff so that things are presented in a consistent way to parents and students and other community members about how you handle discipline, and not only how you handle discipline, but you know, things like, are you providing a continuum of things that teachers can do to correct misbehaviors and redirect unacceptable behaviors? Do you have a way set up within that system, an overall way that you acknowledge when students do things correctly, and you want to be able to reward or acknowledge those appropriate behaviors that they are demonstrating? So practices, on the other hand, are things that we set in place for student behavior. They're the supports that we have for our students. So things like procedures that we set up in our building that help our students know exactly what we expect and how they should behave in different areas of the building. So at a school level, you may have procedures for how you want students to enter the building in the morning, or how you want students to exit and go to their car in the afternoon if they're picked up, or go to the bus if they ride a bus home. You may have procedures in your building for how students walk down the hallway, or what their behavior should look like when they're in the school cafeteria for lunch. So those things are what we refer to as practices, and all of those things are really determined by our data. So you see data on there. That's kind of what we utilize for our decision making around those systems and practices. And ultimately, those things will all help improve the outcomes and the goals that we have set up at our building level. So currently, you see there in the center, Tableau Data Visualization, or Infinite Campus. That's the database that our state currently uses. We may have some schools out there that are using some other things to help you collect data around behavior, and that's perfectly fine. We have some places that have developed certain things that they're using internally in addition to this, but this is kind of the main database that all of our schools are using. So this is what we want to focus on for improvement with our suggestions and our guidance. These are just some definitions that relate to PBIS. We know that data comes in a lot of different forms. So office discipline referrals are the main thing that when we're looking at behavior data or going into that behavior worksheet within Tableau, data can also come in the form of other records such as attendance, grades, different surveys that you can do. And we want to make sure that our data is documented and shared for the most effective route for action planning. So we always encourage our schools to share the data with their staff so that staff are familiar with what the numbers look like and whether or not you're being successful with the things that you're implementing to try to improve. So this slide gives us some rationale. We know those definitions are there. So now we want the rationale is really we want to be able to take this subjectivity out of how we handle our discipline within that discipline system. So we are always suggesting to schools that they try to keep their data as objective as possible, because without that, we have a tendency, we're all human, and we have a tendency to want to make ambiguous or emotionally driven decisions. We'll sometimes hear schools say, our cafeteria is out of control, behavior in there is just outrageous. But when we look at the data, that may not, necessarily really be where the biggest issue with behavior exists. So, that may be in that point in time, if a teacher's in there and it seems like the cafeteria is out of control, that may feel like that's the biggest place that they have issues. But in fact, the data may not show that. So it's really important that our PBIS teams are looking at that data regularly, and that the data they're looking at is the most current data. It has been entered, on a regular basis. And what is in there is as accurate as possible to reflect the reality of what's going on in the building. Data can be used for identifying and planning and addressing those problems. It can also be used for successes. If your office referrals decrease, I recently worked with a school that a high school, they had a 40% decrease in their office referrals from last year, just because of some of the things they were initiating. And so that's a huge success. And that's something that we really prompt those teams to share with their staff. so that increases buy-in among all staff with what they're trying to accomplish. And it praises staff for adhering to those systems that they have set up. Hang on, let me go back here. So data allow us to look at a problem. Hang on, I apologize. All right, here we go. Now I'm on the right slide. So one of the things that we also really like to promote with our teams, and we train this, is being able to drill down their data. So now, if you're not familiar with it, you are able to do that through Tableau data visualization. So you're able to kind of use that drill down feature and eliminate some of those pieces of the data that you don't want to look at. You can kind of prioritize some of those areas where you see that you're having more like an increase in office referrals. So we talk about and we train our teams about how to develop a precision statement. And basically what they need to be able to do is to answer those questions: who, what, where, when, how often, and why. So they need to be able to pull that information from the database in order to create that precision statement. So to go back to that example I gave you about the cafeteria and saying that the behavior is out of control, that's a very generic statement. There's a lot of subjectivity with that statement. There's not really a lot of clarity with that statement. But if we can drill down our data and we can say, we're having a problem in our cafeteria with the 5th grade students at 11:30, and the behavior seems to be that they're being disrespectful to the monitor in the cafeteria, and that's mainly happening on Wednesdays, or it may be happening Monday through Friday. I don't know, every day they're in there. But if you see what I'm saying is, if you can focus that down or drill that down to a specific precision statement, then the solution becomes a little more obvious. Then we can do some reteaching with that 5th grade group. We can go in and revisit what our expectations for cafeteria behavior are with that particular group, instead of just making it an overarching problem that impacts the whole school, when maybe it's only one subgroup of students that is causing that issue. So why use data for decision making? This seems like a pretty simple question, but one thing that makes it really important is local context. So if you think back to that question that I asked you, when I asked you to reflect on what this looks like in your district, we know that we have a lot of variety within our state, within our districts. We have some very rural areas that have smaller populations and less diversity. And we have more urban areas that have larger numbers of people and a lot of diversity. So context from one district to another related to a problem statement or a precise, coming up with a precise statement is going to look different. It's not going to be the same in every single district. So we want to be able to ask the right questions before we start looking at solutions. I think sometimes schools will feel like they're kind of on a treadmill. They're trying all these different things and nothing is working. So with what we're doing with schools, we're trying to get them to be able to apply some of this in their decision making, so that they're able to kind of pinpoint an appropriate solution, and they don't spend so much time, just spinning their wheels trying to figure out what will effectively eliminate a problem or extinguish a certain behavior that they're not wanting to occur. So when we use data, it's helping us to identify those problems. It helps us to refine the context, and it helps us to define the questions that we need to define in order to lead us to an effective solution. We always like to kind of share this because, you know, many times people will think that decision making is kind of a straight line process. We have a problem, we're going to solve it. When in fact, it's a very fluid process. And we're always saying in PBIS that we deal in circles and triangles. So this is an example of a circle that relates to our continuous quality improvement through how we do database decision making. So we're going to implement something, we're going to evaluate it and see if it's working, and you know, we've come up with that plan, we're going to implement it and then evaluate it and so forth. And then, you know, through that evaluation, if it's not working, we may modify it a little bit, we may tweak it, or we may totally come up with a whole new plan. So you know, it's constantly fluid, it's constantly moving, it's constantly changing. So that's something that we, you know, like for you all to think about is, you know, when you're looking at problems that you're trying to solve, that there's not always a clear cut solution. And I know you all know this, and you need to have something in place that helps you go back and evaluate and look at that and see if you need to refine it. Or tweak it a little bit in order to make it more effective. All right, so this is the point that I was going to turn it over to Lee. And Lee, I'm not sure if you're on the call. If you made it on, I'm going to turn it over to you.
I am on. I've had some issues today. I'm here and I'm so happy to be here. Okay, so let's talk about data integrity. So what is that? It's the procedures and the practices that we put in place so that we can maintain the accuracy of our data and also the consistency of our data. And that allows us to use our data to make good database decisions. If we are inaccurate or inconsistent with the gathering of our data, then it's going to lead us to some false assumptions about what's really going on in our buildings. And just like Karen said, you know, we have a feeling about what's going on, like, you know, the cafeteria is a mess. Well, what does that really mean? And sometimes, you know, when you're in that circumstance or that situation in that building, you think that there's something that is going awry with your discipline system in the cafeteria. But if you don't really dig into, first of all, how you're gathering that data and tracking that data, and then making sure that that data is accurate, you could be making a lot of work for yourself and implement things that aren't going to change that behavior. It could just be an organizational feature. Some of our schools are old and their cafeterias are very small. And you all know we can't start serving lunch at 8 o'clock in the morning. We can't spread out our lunch schedule all day long. And sometimes we just have too many kids in a certain area. It happens with the hallways too, with some of these older buildings. So you really need to look at the data. First of all, ask yourself what kind of data you're collecting so that you can make those good decisions, and then look at the data to form some good plans to implement to improve that. And so our data needs to be useful. It needs to match the perceptions across all staff, students, families. And if we don't do that, then again, we're going to get inaccurate data and we're going to make some false assumptions, and that leads to poor decision making. So how can you do that? Okay, so the very first thing we ask, and if you already have a PBIS team, or if you've got a culture and climate team in your building that is already meeting and looking at data, I really applaud you for that. It's something that we need to be looking at on a monthly basis, because if we're looking at old data, then that's not very useful for us. We need to really know what's happening in our buildings on a day-to-day basis. But in order to do that, we need to define problem behaviors. This is so important for our districts and our schools. Defining those problem behaviors look very different. Those problem behaviors look very different in elementary school versus middle and high school. And they even look different from school to school within a district. For example, I worked with a very urban school system. in the past, and they decided that any type of profanity at their middle school that wasn't directed at someone and wasn't said in anger, they were just going to use that as a teachable moment. And we'll talk about minor and major infractions in a minute. But just to go to that child and say, that's an inappropriate word to use, I would need for you to choose another word and go on with your business. And so it wasn't an office discipline referral. I also worked with several very rural middle schools. And so for their problem definitions and for classroom managed versus office managed, profanity that was overheard, that again wasn't directed at anyone or said in anger, that was still always sent directly to the office. So there's a lot of leeway within that, but we also have to consider our community and our culture and climate, and we have to consider what fits best in the context of that school building. So, it takes some work, and it's got to be done collectively with input from all stakeholders. But that's where we really need to begin, and looking at the kind of data that's on IC and Tableau, and the kind of problem definitions that are on there, and having discussions about what should be classroom managed versus office managed. So, we need to clarify what those inappropriate behaviors look like and sound like in the building. We need to identify major and minor behavioral examples of that, and then support one another. And then we can use that data to make good, sound decisions. So talking about that again, the school needs to have those clear definitions of what minor behavior infractions look like and what major behavior infractions look like, of what office managed looks like versus what's always staff managed and what that looks like. It's helpful to develop a discipline flow chart. If you're not familiar with PBIS, or even if you are, we really recommend that the school develops a flow chart so that when misbehavior happens, they can determine whether it's a minor infraction and the route they are going to take to correct that minor infraction, or whether it's a major infraction and an office discipline referral needs to be written. And again, I can't say how important it is to get input from your staff, get input from your families, get input from your students if you're working with a middle school or high school. And in that, and when you're doing that, then everybody feels a sense of ownership in that. And the kids know when they engage in a minor infraction, what's going to happen, or when they engage in a major infraction, what's going to happen. And the parents know that too. And the parents can really be your advocates when they're brought into this discipline system and they're asked to help with this, or they're even educated through in-services or brochures or anything like that. But if they know what's going to happen to their student when their student engages in a problem behavior, then they're much more likely to be on the same page with you, and they're going to support you. It's important to put it in the student handbook and the staff handbook. Does it match up with the discipline policies of your district? That's also another important thing to ask. So if you've got those definitions in place of those problem behaviors, then you're going to be creating not only consistency with dealing with those problem behaviors, but with predictability. And we all know that our kids, if they're in an environment that they can predict, that they feel safer and they can achieve more in that setting. Okay, if you read that quickly, and I would venture to say all of you have seen this quote, but it just bears repeating. I think, when we talk about dealing with problem behaviors, if kid can't read, we teach them to read. If they can't calculate, we teach them to calculate. But still, in this day and time, if they don't know how to behave, we punish them. And I don't think that makes a lot of sense now, because we need to be teaching appropriate behaviors in an instructional way, just the same way we teach academics. We need to teach those behaviors up front at the beginning of the school year. It's that old adage of you can pay me now or you can pay me later. If you do the upfront work for the first couple of weeks in all settings, including the buses, and they know what is expected of them, and they know what's going to happen if they are engaging in inappropriate behavior, then there's a lot of time saved in that. And again, it makes for a more predictable and safe environments for the students. And so for sure, the minor infractions should be used as teachable moments. And the kids should be corrected within that context. The major infractions, when a kid engages in one of those, they should know immediately, yep, well, I'm going to the office for that. You know, there's no guesswork involved with that. And then the administrator deals with that problem behavior and hands out a consequence that's actually going to extinguish that behavior over time. And that's why we need to look at our data in a very methodical way. We need to gather that data in a very accurate way and then look at it monthly to see if we're making a difference. So here are just some examples, and we've got thousands of examples from all over the state, but taking the time to actually look at this and what is classroom managed. And as I described earlier, it's a teachable moment. It minimizes interruption of instruction. That's so important. And then the office managed is, again, what goes to the office. And so think about in your district or in your school, what does that look like? Have you all taken the time to differentiate between classroom and office managed and in-serviced your staff about that? This is just a little template that we use also. And like I said, it's important not only to describe what it looks like, but what it sounds like in all the different areas in your building and even on the school bus. And again, that creates consistency too. And again, every single school and every single district is going to look a little bit different with that. We really recommend that you use a T-chart to start fleshing this out. You know, talk during faculty meetings, talk with your folks about making those lists of minor infractions. And your data is going to indicate the minor infractions that you're going to want to monitor and the major infractions that you're going to want to monitor. And then, you know, it's so important for your team to be meeting monthly and looking at your data and for them to have instant access to that data. There should be one or two people on that team that whatever you use, if you use the school-wide information system or if you use Tableau, that they can go in there and they can pull those graphs out and those reports to take to the meetings. So everybody can get a sense of real time and what's happening in your building. And also making sure that you're keeping up with your planning and that you're using team minutes to guide your decisions from meeting to meeting. And you're always looking at your student outcome data too. Karen talked about earlier also, you know, looking at the problem behavior, looking at the location, time of day by individual student. All that stuff's important, along with attendance and the other examples that she listed. So, you know, main idea, teams need the right information to make a good decision. Not sure if I would use, you know, the right form at the right time, but effective decisions that are actually going to impact our work and impact student behavior. So again, you need to be ready to review your discipline data and your academic data, and then use your decision-making skills to formulate a plan or an action plan for what you're going to implement. And please remember, it's okay to say, hey, everything's going pretty well right now. Karen alluded to that earlier about celebrating successes. I don't think that we we do that enough at all in our schools and districts. When things are going well, we need to pat each other on the back. We need to pat our kids on the back and our families on the back and say, we've had a pretty darn good month or semester or year with regard to our behavioral data. Okay. And then looking at the big seven. And that is what research tells us that we need to look at in order to be the ones that are making those good, solid decisions with regarding student behavior. Average referrals per day per month. That indicates when, we may need to go back and reteach some of our expectations. Or again, when things are going well, celebrate. Referrals by problem behavior. And that's why defining problem behaviors are so important by school or by district. Referrals by location. And, sometimes, like I said, with these organizational features of some of these smaller or older schools, sometimes there's just some things that we need to consider and really start thinking outside the box to try to lessen those referrals by location. By time, a lot of things happen in a school building during the day. I personally like to look at it by 15-minute increments, because if you're looking at it hourly, I still even think that there's a lot of stuff that happens within an hour in a school building. And so if you can look at it within 15-minute increments also, that gives you better data to plan with. Information by student. And we know we've got some students that need more supports, and our data will indicate that to us. If we've got a child that just needs some more reteaching or needs to have some instruction so that they can be proficient with their behavior in different areas. Referrals by day of the week. We all know that that's really important too. Some of these things we can't necessarily do something about, but we certainly can look at the days of the week that are the most problematic and brainstorm and decide what we can do maybe on Mondays, to knock some of that bad stuff off of those kids' shoulders when they're getting off the bus, if they've had a really crummy weekend, or when they're getting ready to go home for the weekend on Fridays. Sometimes that makes a big difference too. And by grade. And so, that is another thing that we all know is important, is looking by grade. Okay. As I slid in here to start the presentation, I think Christy has this slide.
Thank you, Lee.
Thanks.
So Karen and Lee have both give you a lot of information this afternoon about data and about gathering data and accuracy of it. And so just want to talk a little bit about how we do gather that data. And we gather that from our office referral forms. And here are just some tools to make data-informed decisions, because when we consider what we need, we have to go back to our referral form and remember that these are the things that should be on your referral form. Now, there are many schools across the state that are still using a paper referral form, and that's perfectly fine. There are some schools who teachers are putting their own office referrals in through IC. But just making sure you have the student's accurate name, the date, the time of the incident. And that's very important, because a lot of times when we are uploading information, it's been a long day, we're getting to these things and looking at reconciling things. Oftentimes we look at when we're taking care of the matter or the reconciliation, and we're not talking about the time of the incident. So that's very important that you put in the time of the incident, the location of the incident, the student's teacher, the student's grade level. All of this information will help us on the other end of looking at our data and making informed decisions. The referring staff. Perhaps you're a staff member and it's not a student that's in your homeroom or in your particular class. Others involved. Were there other students involved? Were there other teachers or staff members involved? The problem behavior. And Lee averted to this quite a bit, talking about major and minors, making sure that we put the problem behavior, the possible motivation. And I know this is a very difficult piece for a lot of people. As a former administrator, I often had teachers say, I don't know the motivation, but this is not saying that you are making an exact perfect decision, but you're giving a possible motivation. Next was what was happening before the behavior. This is very important so that we can be proactive in our decision making for our goals. What was happening before the behavior happened? Possible consequences, the administrative decision, and then any other comments. These are things that will just help us make informed decisions, and when we look at our office referrals monthly as a team, that we have the most accurate information as possible. So we'll take a look at an office referral form. This obviously is a paper referral form. And at the top, you see the pertinent information that we just discussed, which is part of the Big 7. Then you see minor problem behavior, major problem behavior, possible motivation, the administrative decision. So all of the pieces that we just discussed are on this actual office referral form. So just some things to think about. When you are filling out that office referral form, do you perceive it as an intervention? Is it going to assist in changing this behavior? Is it used to collect data? Is your referral form used to truly collect data? Is it fast? Is it quick? It says less than 60 seconds. For teachers, that's an important piece when you're looking at your office referral form. How long is it going to take me to fill this form out, or how to submit this information? Are we consistent in using it? Is everybody completing the referral form the same way, and they understand how to accurately complete the form? Just some things to think about as we look at this office referral form. Possible motivation, once again, just going back over what I just said a few minutes ago, it's important that we at least perhaps know the possible motivation. You can see maybe it's to obtain peer attention or obtain adult attention. Maybe it's to obtain items or activities, or to avoid peers or adults. It's all this is giving us as administrators, when this comes to your office, it just gives us an idea or a possible motivation for the behavior. Why did it occur? Then another thing to look at, just to make sure that you understand, and Lee went through major and minors very well just a few minutes ago, but is it a major referral or is it a minor referral? Most school districts put in only majors, but there are several that do put in minors. Just something to think about as you put in those minor behaviors. If you're putting it in your IC referral form and you're not using a paper form, there's a place for notes where you can say this is actually a teacher managed event. It's a minor event, but you notate that to make sure that when you're looking at your data, and once again at that monthly PBIS meeting, and you're making data informed decisions, that you know whether you're looking at majors or minors. Often I go into schools and we'll be looking at their major office referrals, and many of them are truly just minor referrals. We see a lot of cumulative minor referrals coming to the office as a major. Those are things that as a school you have to determine, or as a district you have to determine, what is going to be the difference in majors and minors. Are minors going to equal a major? Are they going to be looked at as infractions? I know that's a tricky word right now, but just something to think about when you're talking about your referral form. It's very important that it's filled out completely and accurately so that you can make the decisions you need to make as a PBIS Tier 1 team. Next, the next slide talks about drilling down the data. And we refer to drill downs a lot. I know when we're providing TA for districts, looking at drilling down the data. Many times teams will come together, they'll have the information, but they really don't know what to do with it. So drilling down the data, if you recall from your Tier 1 team training, we talked about how to come up with a precise problem statement. And at the bottom of this slide, next to the last, you'll see where the precise problem statement is written out in red. It says, in September, there were a group of 10 4th and 5th grade students who referred for minor defiance in the classroom during the morning classroom period in order to avoid task. Remember, the precise problem statement is just a combination of what has been put into the office referral form. And when you look at the data, you're looking at your red flag item at the top. For instance, on this particular one, as Karen referred to, who, what, when, and where. It says in September, there's a spike of problem behaviors between 8 a.m. and 9:30 a.m. So that's what your team is looking at. They notice this by doing a drill down and looking at their monthly behavior. Their filters for their drill down. Who is it? Where is it happening? What grades? What is the problem behavior? In this instance, it's defiance. The perceived motivation is task avoidance. So the drill down just helps you as a team to be able to look at your data, take every piece of the office referrals, every piece of the data information, and I'll show you in just a minute on that with Tableau, and coming up with your problem statement. And then your most important piece of this is the goal. You have your information. What will be your goal for your next monthly meeting? Or perhaps you're going to do your goal in a grading period. That all depends on your team, how you decide that. But this team decided that by the end of November, the team would like to see less than 5 referrals per month from 4th and 5th graders in the classroom before first recess. So they wanted to see that before 9:30 a.m. So this is a very realistic, precise problem statement and a very realistic goal for them to try to achieve. Once you've done the drill down and you have your precise problem statement, then you can move into how to be effective. How can you make sure that your goal will be reached? How can everybody involved in your school make sure that the goal is reached for this behavior? So if you'll look at the left-hand column of this slide, you'll see solution components. So we have the prevention, the teaching, and the recognition, extinction, corrective consequence, and then at the bottom, the data collection. Now, many teams actually use a template just like this, and they go through their action steps. They go through who is responsible for this particular item, when will it occur, how will a fidelity be measured, and then any notes or updates that they have. So if you'll just look at the top where it says prevention, you'll notice that it says for the action step, they recommend their teachers start with easy or fun warm-up task. And it's the responsible party is the 4th and 5th grade teachers or the 4th and 5th grade teams. And when do they want this to occur? Remember, they want to have this goal reached by November, but they want this particular item to be met by October the 6th. And then how are they going to make sure that they're doing it the right way? Remember, fidelity means we are following the plan, we're doing it the correct way. So their fidelity measure it says for NB, and I assume that's the principal perhaps or the coach, to visit and check with the teachers. Simply making sure that the teachers did what was in the action steps and the responsible party. So when you work through each piece of these, then what they will do at the next meeting is they will go back and look at their data. They'll drill down their new data and let's see if they reach their goal. So we'll move on. So let's talk about this for a minute. It says current reality and gaps. Does a team exist for behavior support planning and problem solving? Now, I'm not sure who's on the call today, but I hope that you have a team, whether it's a PBIS team or perhaps it's a culture climate team, and you're looking at your problem solving. You have a team that comes together at least once a month. I know I go in many schools now and teams are meeting every 2 weeks, and that's perfectly fine. Is there a clearly defined system in place for collecting and summarizing the office discipline referral? Perhaps, are you using Tableau? Many of our schools in the past used Swiss the school-wide information system. Are these two things in place? It's very imperative that both of these things be in place. So your team comes together. They're looking at all the data, and I'm sure many of you can relate to this left picture because you have sticky notes everywhere and everybody's talking and discussing this information. It says helping schools make sense of their data using Tableau data visualization. And if you haven't begun using that, we're going to go into that just a little bit. What is Tableau? It's a tool that connects directly to your Infinite Campus database to provide an interactive visual depiction of your data. It is a creation tool, a visual creation tool, and it's a data analysis portal. It provides insight into state, district, school, and student data. It presents data trends and spotlights outliers. And if you don't have access to Tableau in your district, talk with your local district administrators to be granted access to this tool. Many times that is run through their DPP or perhaps their superintendent or assistant superintendent can give them access to that. So Tableau provides an analysis of behavior events and resolutions. It's disaggregated by month, day of the week, and the time of the day. It filters options by race, special ed, etc. It allows for easy identification of students who have been removed from the classroom for a specified number of days. And it provides comparison of behavior event and resolution counts by demographic group, highlighting discrepancies in the ratio of student population to event population. So I want to go ahead and move to the next frame because I want you to see what it actually looks like. When you open up Tableau, you're going to look for the behavior analysis workbook. Now, there are other workbooks in Tableau, but this is what we're going to discuss today. And I know this slide is a little bit difficult to see, but this is actually what it looks like. And I love the setup of this. I like to look at this because I can quickly go in when I'm providing TA to districts and I can say, let's pull up your behavior analysis. And I always tell people, don't be afraid of this. Don't be afraid that you're going to mess it up. You know, take some time just to play with it. Across the top, there are threads that you can look at. You can filter many things on the right-hand columns of this graph. So, you know, take some time. Also, I know that many of the co-ops offer training in Tableau. And also, as the PBIS ISF consultants with KDE, Karen, Lee, Rachel, and I will be glad to help you with this. Things to consider about behavior codes. Let's talk about behavior codes for just a second. KDE provides consistent coding options for events and resolutions. They provide that. Districts can create additional codes but cannot delete or change the state codes. District schools can define behaviors to match their discipline systems and code of conduct. Training staff assures consistency with how behavior is entered into the database. Just a piece I want to make sure that you understand about this is that within your own district, you have the coding options that are provided for you. But as a district, you need to define those behavior codes. For instance, what does disrespect mean? What does your district call disrespect? What does your district call defiance? What does your district call failing to follow directions? So I'm going to go back one slide just for a second, but when we go back and we look at the event type on the far left-hand side, if we drill down into that and we look, my colleagues and I find across the state that there will be numerous codes that have been created by districts. Perhaps they mean the same thing. Or perhaps the districts have not defined within their district what those behavior codes mean. Even from school to school, even from high school to high school. So making sure that you define those codes and that your district has an understanding and that your teachers are taught what those codes mean. One I see a lot in high school is tardy. What does tardy mean for your district? Does tardy mean the student is in the classroom? Or does tardy mean the student is sitting in their seat? Something to think about when we look at this, because the ultimate goal here is to get the correct data each month and to be able to drill it down and to be able to make your precision problem statements and to set goals. And in order to do that, you have to have good data. So as we begin, I'm going to transition over to my colleague, Blake Connie, and we're going to think about next steps. How can you begin to align your system internally to improve the quality of the data and to assure more consistency?
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us this afternoon. We just have a few minutes left, and so I will be pretty concise here. I was invited to talk about some of the technical aspects of the PBIS data. So my role as a Safe Schools consultant is really focused on bullying prevention, suicide prevention, and kind of the upstream mental health supports that we can put into place for schools. But I also handle I'm the data steward for our work group. So if you have questions about Infinite Campus data, how to enter some of these things, myself or Wendy Spalding can be your point of contact. What the PBIS consultants noticed over their years of training and working with schools is that schools did not have a great way to separate major and minor infractions in Infinite Campus. So when they were looking at that data, it was kind of all or nothing. And so they actually have asked that Infinite Campus add the ability for us to differentiate major versus minor infractions. So anyone that's worked with Infinite Campus knows that it is a very difficult process to make changes in Infinite Campus. And so the best way that we were able to do that was to add it as part of the resolution process. Again, I'm going to be a very quick overview and more so point you in the direction. So if your district decides that you all would like to add major and minors as a code here, let me pull up, there we go. So this slide shows two different referrals and then the resolution added. And so if you notice that little category in the bottom left of that box, this was added. Hold on a second. I think we have till 3 o'clock. Oh, okay. I was told 2:30, so I will slow down. Is that correct? Anyone else?
That is correct. You didn't take as much time as you need. I just didn't want you to feel rushed.
I was told 2:30, so I'm flying. Okay.
You don't have to fly. We've only got one question, so you're going to take the time you need.
Thank you.
Good stuff.
All right. Thanks, Dee Dee. So I'm going to go back now that now we have more time. Okay, so if a district would like to add major and minor infractions, again, as a way to make sure you all have the best data possible or the most actionable data possible to make decisions, and that's whether you're a PBIS school or not, this can be added. And again, it's a district decision, so someone at the district level would need to adjust Infinite Campus to add the behavior code or the resolution code to create major or minor labels. The way you do that is go through the settings. I'm going to give you access to a guidance document at the end of this that will, again, walk you through these things. But I just want to show you what it could look like for your district. So this is just a screenshot of a district that is adding this in. So again, creating that major category, minor category. If you have a category that's currently in there, it could be left over from someone in the past. You can just uncheck any box that you don't want to use as a category. And that would leave you with a major and minor code. As was discussed earlier by Lee and Christy especially, you really want to talk to your staff about what major and minor infractions look like. I would recommend using scenarios and discussing that with the staff and just saying, like, student A does this, this, and this. What would you call that? How would you handle it in the classroom? Would we call that disrespect? Would we call that defiance? And that would allow then you all to all be on the same page, have the same working definition. Because again, defiance, disrespect, and disruption are the three of the biggest areas we see, and those have a lot of overlap. So you as a school want to make sure that you're on the same page and discussing what those things look like. Again, minor infractions are things that, or minor resolutions are things that are going to be handled in the classroom. So that's also a great opportunity to train your staff or to use your staff expertise to work with each other to make sure they have consistent classroom resolutions or the skill set needed to support student behavior in the classroom. So the best way that we could get these codes put into Infinite Campus is through the resolution. So what that means is teachers will enter the event. So would say, Blake had classroom disruption, was talking out loud after told not to. And if the teacher, if that's deemed as a minor infraction, then the teacher would then assign the resolution to say, a conference with Blake or call home or detention after school, whatever the teacher decides. And then when they are marking that in Infinite Campus, would be able to choose in that bottom left box that's highlighted there as a category. They could choose whether it's a minor or a major. Again, all based on your school and district definitions. Once those are established, this allows school districts to use, or schools to pull this data to again be actionable. So schools can then pull a report. So where it says resol level, so resolution level, Infinite Campus or Infinite cuts it off. And so where it says resol level, you can actually pull that down as a drop down and select either major or minor codes so that you can see just that data. So anytime your school, or if you're using Tableau and you want to just filter out major or minor infractions, this will allow you all to do that. Which again, I think one of the advantages here is that a lot of the minor infractions don't always get put into Infinite Campus or into a tracking tool because the teacher addresses it, the teacher handles it, which is great. But on the back end, it kind of does a disservice to the school in terms of decision making and really having a good idea or an accurate idea of where and when these issues are happening, or how to support staff and students to be more successful, in the school. The document that helps probably is the best help for if you want to set up these major and minor codes would be the behavior setup for PBIS tracking in Infinite Campus. The best way to get to that would if you just went to the KDE website and there's a search box. You can do PBIS tracking. You could write this entire title if you want, but if you put in PBIS tracking, it'll get you to a document that is a technical document that walks through step by step how to input or how to create these codes in Infinite Campus. I'm gonna give another shout out. So again, as I mentioned, as a Safe Schools consultant, suicide prevention and bullying prevention are two of the areas that I focus on. PBIS has a great bullying prevention kind of an add-on or extension. It's free of charge if you Google PBIS behavior prevention. They have a ton of resources and a great handbook that you can download for free. And so if you're looking for ways to expand your PBIS or just as ways to address bullying prevention in your school, I would strongly recommend that. At the state, we offer Sources of Strength, which is a really focused on suicide prevention, but the evidence is coming out to show that it supports all around school culture as well as bullying prevention. And so if that'd be something you're interested in, you could reach out to me to get connected with the trainer. Okay. I'm going to invite back our PBIS consultants because they, I think, will be wrapping us up here.
Blake, if you could maybe go back to the slide right before this last slide, if you don't mind. This is Karen again. I want to point out a couple of these resources again, as Blake reviewed some of these, but just to kind of do a quick review of what our main points were from the session that we'd like to have you maybe take away some things from what we talked about. The very last bullet there has some PBIS definitions and some Tableau guidance for users. That's just something that our PBIS team developed, and we're hoping that that resource would be something that your PBIS teams and your district specifically might utilize as you think about how can we make this system work best for us, meeting the needs in the context of our district and our schools. So, you know, looking at the suggestions that are in there, it might prompt some conversations within your district about how you can do that. If you need our assistance or our guidance in helping you do any of those, we're certainly welcome to kind of meet with you or talk with you about ways that we can help you set those things up. We're certainly happy to do that. The behavior event code file is also in there that I think Christy referred to, and just want to reiterate on that, you know, that those are codes that are built into the system. The districts are setting up codes in addition to some of those. Just the importance of defining those codes for your staff. I think that's something that we see a lot in the reports that we're running, is maybe things that are popping up that sound like they're the same thing, maybe in there twice, coded in there twice, or so, you know, if it's confusing to us a little bit, it's bound to be somewhat confusing for staff internally that are trying to utilize the system and enter information in there. So just having a way or thinking about a way that you can define those codes for your staff and then training them on what that means and how to utilize those. The other thing on the majors and minors, we did have a question that popped up in the chat about, can you add additional event types? And I responded to that in the chat, but I wanted to also address that question in case others were wondering about that. Really, from a PBIS perspective, the event probably would be the best place in order, you know, to document major versus minor. But right now, the only place that we can document that is through that resolution. So in thinking about how you do that at your district, you know, I don't know, a lot of districts will utilize Infinite Campus. You know, the teachers will do the office referral form and send it to the administrator. So from a PBIS perspective, anything that's going to that administrator is really a major event. But if it's a minor and it's something that's been handled by the teacher, you can log it as a minor through that resolution code. The administrator can, but the teacher that's sending it in, I think it would be important for them perhaps in the notes to designate this was a classroom managed behavior that occurred, and the teacher, you know, maybe have the teacher list what response they took with that behavior. Say it was a parent conference, or they called the parent, or they put the student in timeout, or whatever was appropriate within the continuum of things that they can utilize to redirect behavior. I think that would be helpful in a way to an administrator, because it's going to also give that administrator kind of a trail of what's been done before, you know, this does come to me. So if the teacher's done 2 or 3 things, and at this point now they really need that assistance from the administrator, they could put in the notes at that point, continued behavior, has been addressed by the teacher multiple times, requesting intervention from a school administrator. So at that point, then the school administrator could intervene and take care of it from an administrative standpoint and what interventions they have to kind of pull from to modify that behavior. So I think it would be important to understand that you're going to probably have to communicate some through the notes in order for this to work the way that it's set up currently. So I hope that helps, and we will continue to work to improve some of this so that it is a little more user-friendly for you all, and we'll be looking at perhaps trying to request if we can and look at changing those event codes as well, which might make it a little bit easier than going through the resolution. So that was a great question. Just kind of, I guess, I want to allow enough time here at the end for other things that need to be talked about and finish up. But here's our contact information. If any of you all need to get in touch with us, please feel free to reach out. We'll be happy to help you.
Thank you so much for all that great information. Appreciate that today. We had one question that came in, or we had a few questions that came in. One of them I think we answered already. So we can add additional event types. I thought we could not make any changes to events only resolutions. So we kind of cut and pasted what Karen's response to that and it said currently the event code cannot be changed, although we will be requesting for that to also be modified, as this will really be the most appropriate location to mark major and minor. And then it mentioned that Blake was going to cover it. So would you like to say anything more about that?
No, really at this time, that's the most accurate response we can provide for that question.
Okay. And so the next question is, where can we find the PBIS guidelines for minor and major?
Well, I'm not sure who that question came from, but we usually work with, when we go through our training at Tier 1 with teams, we guide them through that process, through the training. We don't really have a document, so to speak. We really just help our teams through that process of developing those. We can provide examples if there's someone that would like to have some examples of how that looks or what that looks in other districts. We can certainly send some information and provide examples for them, but we don't currently have a document because we allow the teams within the schools and the districts the flexibility. They set that up, according to their own system.
Right. So, but it's a great question, and if it'd be helpful, what I'm seeing is that we could provide some information, and that might be helpful to districts. So, if you ask and you shall receive, it looks like. It's I think could be similar, and if you want to add another question, someone said it would be maybe similar to the instructions that's been provided on updating resolutions to have a category of minor and major. So, if that'd be helpful. That would be something we could add to. And the last question that I have right now, and feel free to continue to add questions to app.gosoapbox.com, and the access code is KDE data. But the last question I have right now is, would events considered minor be included in Safe Schools data?
I can speak to that. It would not. So Safe Schools data just pulls specific categories. So like drug, alcohol, fighting, bullying, harassment. So those things wouldn't qualify for a minor. So if they were somehow coded to one of those big events and considered a minor, then yes, it would come, but I would say that most of those events would not be considered minor.
Okay, great. All right, well, that's all the questions you have. So I want to thank the whole PBIS team. I appreciate your presentation today, as I'm sure others do too.